Welcome to this week's Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network. I thought about doing this from inside the barn here at NCC, the Classic, but it's a little chaotic with a cattle sale getting underway, so I didn't want to be in anybody's way. But some amazing cattle that are here, and of course, a lot of optimism as well that's going on in this industry. So it's nice when we're doing this report. We got some green on the screen. We're going to talk more about some of the big factors that are affecting this cattle market this week. As you can see, Brad Kooima joins us. He's with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa, and kind of start out cash market. It's everybody wants to talk about I know it's been quiet. Is there a good opportunity to see some cash pick up before the cattle on feed report, or are we going to end up waiting until after?
I'm afraid we're going to wait. Thanks for having me on, Susan, by the way. I'm afraid we're going to have to wait till after, but maybe I'm wrong. There are some 180 bids surfacing in the South by one of the majors, which that's where basically the trade was last week. So fully steady bids on a Thursday morning is not a bad sign, in my opinion. Most of us are expecting and asking higher than that. Whether that'll happen ahead of the report or not, it's a great question. Usually the packer wants to stay in denial as long as possible, hoping somehow, maybe against all hope, that there's something bearish on the report that they can use to try to get some cattle bought cheaper. But feeling we're getting is that these packers are getting a little closer to the knife. Didn't get a lot of business done last week. And we're still killing it. The last few days here, we're still killing at a fairly decent pace. Of course, you've all heard, complaints here about the margins and some slowdown by some of the packers. Yet, I guess it still seems to me like they do still have to provide product to their regular consumers as well. If you think about it. So I think cash is going to be a little bit better, but we might have to wait a little bit to see it. Deliveries have happened a little bit, this week. No new ones yesterday. And I think when you're talking about cash, of course, anybody that's a cash trader, at least, or a hedger, has to think about basis. Well, right now we're sitting here with FebCal at 184.80. Basis in February 1 to 2 over. So if futures are 1 to 2 over cash, we should really be looking at a 182 or 3 cash market. And I think if you're hedged, it should give you a little more resolve to hold for higher money because, the basis is plenty wide if you're only going to take 180 and have almost a $5 basis. So, there's some things I think that give me a little bit of confidence that I think the cash market will improve a little bit this week.
Since we're talking cash, let's talk weights. How are we doing on these cattle weights at this point?
Well, from visiting with me the last couple of weeks that I've been, trying to balance some of this fundamental news and also recognizing that, USDA news is not infallible, right? You look at cattle on feed reports, and those are the numbers that we use because there's no other numbers to use. So based on that, we thought we would be killing a few more cattle than last year during the first quarter, and we haven't. It's year to date is down 5.3% slaughter. Now, of course, we had the snowstorm in January, which slowed things down, took some weight off, maybe backed a few cattle up. I want to be, cognizant of whether or not these cattle are backing up, but that leads me to finally answering your question. One of the things that would show up would be as if the weights, if we were indeed backing up cattle, then the weights ought to be going up, and they're not. Okay. Most weight categories are at or below a year ago. We haven't been able to say that for a long time. So normally seasonally we would, as we work through the end of the yearling crop, and calves aren't ready, the weights would come down normally. So the weights, I'm encouraged by what the trend of the weights have been. Still kind of watching the overall slaughter level just a little bit, but I don't think that that's necessarily bearish today at all.
What's your takeaway on seasonals at this point?
Well, this is the time of year where you often get a top. Now, disclaimer, right? If all you traded was seasonals, I think you'd have a very difficult time being successful. But having said that, the middle of February would not be an unusual time at all for particularly summer months of live cattle futures to put at least a temporary top in, and the cash market as well. We're going into a time where people say, well, why is that? Well, fundamentally, it might be because we're going into this real slow time demand-wise. On the backside of the Super Bowl, you get into look at the pork. We're finally getting a big rally in the pork. We're finally got a pork feature, and it's at the expense of the beef, and you won't get a real good beef feature till you're closer to warmer weather. Although it's pretty nice today. Let's all go. In fact, we're going to grill steaks at the office today for lunch. But the Mother's Day, the Memorial Day, that big feature, and that's a ways out there. So I don't know. There's enough enthusiasm here. I don't want to come off like all of a sudden Brad's real bearish. I'm not. And we're in a big macro low long cycle where we got less numbers, but the futures being premium and this incentive to feed there, I want to be sensitive to making sure that we don't back up cattle.
So, and I want to come loop back around to this whole thing with the consumers and the grilling, but we do have a cattle on feed report. You and I are recording this on a Thursday morning. So we're not going to see the report till tomorrow afternoon. What are some of your thoughts on what the numbers could entail when those come out tomorrow?
Good question, because it feels like I've been talking about this report for 3 weeks already, almost since the last one came out. Because as we got into January and weather being a huge part of this thing, the placements felt like they were really, really small. Okay. You had, there's placements all over the place. Some of them as much as more than down 20%, but the trade guess for tomorrow is 88% or 12% down from a year ago. That's an extreme number. Sometimes we bet $1 or a beer here on what we think the placement number is going to be, which I don't know, but my guess is 85 for whoever cares. So I do think though that you do have a kind of high expectations, or there is, pretty friendly expectations built into this report. Nobody's talking about the marketing number at 100. There's one extra marketing day, but we did not have great slaughter for a while there either. Some of that was because of the weather. I hope we let's not take our eye off the ball. Let's make sure that the marketing number is still pretty good. So I hope that we come in that low on the placement number. We do have a little bit of a premium back here that we do need to justify. And don't forget, it is really unusual for June and August cattle to be premium cash cattle in February. The summer months are actually higher than what the bids are right now. It once maybe in the last 25 years. So it's a little bit of an oddity and something that I think we need to be a little bit keep an eye on it.
So last week we talked about Fox News, and now ABC News is coming out doing this whole thing about, the cost of beef in the grocery stores and the consumer price index, and how we're going to see a pullback to the proteins because there's no cattle there at all. You gave a great explanation last week, and I really wanted to retouch it this week because we did have some folks wanting you to expand on your thoughts. Remember, this is Family TV.
The serious Brad or sarcastic Brad, it's hard to separate those two. I mean, first of all, beef is different than a lot of other stuff. Okay. You can store a bin of corn for 3, 4, 5 years if you want to. You can't store beef that long. We don't throw beef away. Okay. If you can sell beef at a high price, does that mean that demand's bad? No, that means quite the opposite. The higher you can sell a supply of it is the reflection of how good the demand is. Come on. So some of this whole backdrop of how they're defining what demand is for beef, in my opinion, is wrong. Okay. Now, having said that, okay, so every Tuesday you get this 13 major states in the United States. A lot of people get it. I get it. Where they break down every cut. I mean, they break down like 8 different cuts of sirloin and like 7 different cuts of ribeyes and stuff like that. This stuff is not very much different at all, and a lot of cuts are below a year ago. Come on, so all of a sudden it becomes a story. And what I worry is that you tell the consumer that it's high and they'll believe it's too high, whether it really is or not, because that's just the way it seems to work. Advertising, that's why we always talk about, well, is there a beef feature this weekend? Because if they feature it, it'll move, whether it's a deal or not. I don't mean to sound sarcastic to the consumer, but some consumers aren't that well informed. Okay. So yeah, of course, nothing against anybody that sells coffee. Okay. But I mean, you want to talk about something that's high priced. Nobody talks about that. I mean, we're going to wait in line to get a $6 cup of coffee, right? I think you've got a segment of the clientele that, thanks to COVID, figured out that they can cook a steak at home. They can do it 2 or 3 times a week. It's better than what they get in a restaurant, and it's cheap. And so I think that changed the paradigm on beef demand, and maybe is undersold a little bit. I know we got a great product. Let's quit telling these people it's too high. Come on.
Exactly.
$80 steak, sure, it's a treat at a restaurant. That's high. But if you're going to go buy a $10.99 ribeye like you get in town here, I don't think that's too high.
All right, it's good advice, good things to think about when they go to the grocery store, because obviously the beef is there. And so they just need to eat more beef.
It's a great product and healthy product, renewable, sustainable, whatever. I mean, we know it, you know it. The people that you're sitting there in front of know it too, but we got to tell our story better.
Exactly. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you, Brad?
kkvtrading.com if you're that kind of person, or if you still have a phone, 712, that works, 722-0023.
All right. Send me a picture of those steaks that you guys have at lunch today.
You got it.
All right. That's been this week's Cattle Call. As we always remind you, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss, not suitable to all investors. And that's the Cattle Call on the Rural Radio Network.